reinforced, I think, the view that the unemployment numbers will continue to rise. Clearly, the government's package has provided support, and we welcome that. But there are areas in the economy, in sectors most affected, where the support is not broad enough, and that's why we've seen numbers higher than we should have. For example, the Treasury mentioned 6.2% headline unemployment figure. Well, that's only 6.2% because 500,000 people stopped looking. If they were still looking and not with work, the unemployment rate would now be 9.6% based on April figures, remember, because we're not even looking at this month's unemployment, we're looking at last month's. So this is one of the reasons why Labor says two things. Firstly, we need to look at the breadth of the JobKeeper package, particularly in sectors which employ many, many casuals. And secondly, we need to look beyond September 30. The government needs to consider what happens after all of the support falls away. And I'm not saying that's an easy thing to precisely do, but they really have to examine opportunities and options available for the economy and labour market at that point.
The Treasury Secretary at that committee also said today that the true number of Australians out of work at the moment is 15% or thereabouts, because the headline rate doesn't represent the effect of that JobKeeper subsidy.
That's right. I mean, the participation rate falling as it has, I mean, there were 600,000 jobs lost, as you know, is according to the ABS in April. But of the 600,000, 500,000, or just under 500,000 people stopped looking. And it's that reduction in the participation rate that has led to, still a high unemployment rate, but 6.2 is misleading because it's certainly not reflecting what had happened. And what had happened was we saw a massive job loss. Now, we haven't looked at May's figures and June, and Treasury talked about June. And look, it's true too that if the economy starts easing restrictions, we'll hopefully see some recovery. That should happen in part, but there's a long way to go. And again, our concern would be sectors that will not be opening up very quickly, like aviation. And further, what do we do beyond the end of JobKeeper, JobSeeker packages? How will businesses survive if they're still dealing with this issue full on and front on? I think that's, at least there has to be some contingency plans of government to deal with those issues now and deal with the potential challenges we'll face at the end of September. They should be examining those options now. Because these figures today show,
but in terms of the recovery, it's important that the states reopen their borders, surely. And in terms of the national project, we can't have nations within nations. Would you like to see the likes of Queensland, South Australia, WA start to re-engage? Because if we don't have a vaccine for a year, 18 months, if ever, what's their plan?
Well, exactly. We need to, of course, we want to see the easing restrictions based on independent medical advice, and that's what's guiding the governments, whether it be New South Wales or whether it be South Australia or Victoria and Queensland elsewhere. So where we can, we need to see a greater level of economic activity. That's what we hope. We also have to be mindful of no potential breakout. We have seen countries who've eased restrictions early and then had to shut them down very quickly. I think the state governments in the main have been very careful, but been very focused on opening up where they can based on health advice. That's what everyone wants, obviously, but we need to do it based on the best possible advice. So we don't, as I say, so we don't find ourselves having to clamp down again like happened in Singapore and other countries.
It seems that, you know, for Queensland, if you look at that situation, my colleague Andrew Clennell has been reporting that the Queensland government isn't keen to reopen their economy because it's been propped up by JobKeeper. In part, the employment market's being propped up, and therefore they've got the scope to keep their state shut until September. But isn't that going to have detrimental economic effects, not just in Queensland? Of course it will affect the tourism industry and related industries, but it affects other parts of the nation as well. So essentially the federal government's picking up the bill in order that Anastasia Palaszczuk can keep the border shut.
Well, it's not Queensland. It's Queensland, Western Australia, South Australia, Northern Territory and Tasmania. The only two states that have opened up and allow incoming, outgoing are New South Wales and Victoria, the two largest populous states. And each state has to make its own decisions about the potential health risks, but I think they're looking to work in harmony. I mean, what would be ideal, Kieran, is when we can, that we open up all of our internal borders so that we can have better economic activity. But that has to be based on health advice, of course. We've seen countries that have just not listened to the health advice, and they are in a terrible state, which will, by the way, impact terribly upon their economy too going forward. So whilst there are some people quite dangerously advising to open up areas of our economy and society in a way which would lead to an escalation of spikes of contagion, I think that through the federal process, I think that Australia has done as good as any country, and we should be proud of that. Now we need to deal with the economic challenges. That includes easing restrictions. It also includes looking at the stimulus packages that may be required beyond September 30, so our economy doesn't fall off a cliff, which is possible if nothing is being considered beyond that date. Now, it may well be that the economic activity improves faster than we anticipated, which will be good because we'll need less support. But we have to at least plan for the possibility that not everything will be in a very good state in that period after that end date, and therefore there needs to be options on the table for government and parliament. And that's what we're calling on the federal government to consider. As we called upon them to introduce a wage subsidy, we're saying make sure you have other options if required.
And basically those options, are you saying you want JobKeeper extended till the end of the year? What are you thinking on that?
Well, I think the government should come up with its proposals. It has access to Treasury. It has access to government agencies. I think it has should have a true picture of what is happening in the labour market and economy. We'll work with the government, but it's for them to come up with the precise options. But we've been very constructive. We've put up suggestions. We've not opposed anything that's gone through the parliament, even when we've sought to, what we hoped was, improve a particular option. So my view is it really is incumbent on the government to consider an array of options, and we will work constructively with them, as Anthony Albanese has made very clear. We'll continue to do that. But when we feel there's no plan in place, contingency plan, then of course we'll raise that issue because that's our job to hold the government to account in dealing with this issue. While working closely with them, we still should raise constructively ideas for them to consider, and that's what we're doing.